Namaste to all of you and welcome to this session on challenges to civil society during lockdown. I will be making the presentation in two parts. First part will be for about 20 minutes and the second part will be for about once again 20 to 25 minutes. And as all of you are well aware, this focus of this presentation will be on rejuvenating civil society during lockdown so that civil society can play a very vibrant and important role in Indian democracy. The major points that we will be discussing in both these two-part kind of session is in the first part, we will discuss regarding what is civil society and also the significance of civil society to democracy, and also a brief overview of civil society in India prior to COVID-19 pandemic. And in the second part of our presentation, I will be dealing with challenges to civil society during lockdown, which is the heart of the entire presentation, and the way forward as to what issues we need to address or what should be the major kind of things that we need to keep in mind while planning for rejuvenating our civil society from overall the kind of the movement of civil society in India concerned, as well as the issues like disaster situations like COVID-19. So we will start with the concept of civil society. Most of you may be very much aware of so-called voluntary sector in India, or non-governmental organizations which are popularly known as NGOs. But the civil society, just because of its the scope, it is also a very much contested kind of a concept. So in my presentation, I will not try to dwell on length as far as the overall the definitions and the kind of the review of all these aspects as such, because the focus is mainly to understand civil society as a whole and try to understand its role in a democracy, and how in a situation, a pandemic kind of a situation or disaster situation, how we need to think of civil society as a whole in engaging with the state to try to see to it that there is a proper balance between the government, governance, and the citizens in general. So for our purpose, we can try to think of civil society as an intermediate space between the state and the individual citizens. Mostly it is marked by, or it comprises the voluntary sector, which is not just limited to NGOs, but also many self-supporting kind of groups. So that way, this concept of civil society is very broad, as we can understand. It comprises all non-state or non-governmental, non-market. This is also a very important aspect. So many a time there are lots of foundations or many kind of organizations which are linked to the market or the corporate sector. So we have to understand that when it comes to civil society organizations, they should not have any kind of market interests also. And also non-household organizations and institutions, like many family or kinship organizations are also not covered here. Civil society basically means some kind of organizations or institutions which have democratic interests in mind rather than just family or household or the market kind of interests. So it includes community or grassroots associations, both registered and non-registered organizations, social movements, cooperatives, labor unions, professional groups, advocacy and development NGOs, formal non-profits, social enterprises, and many more. So this is the broad kind of coverage of the gamut of coverage of all these so-called civil society organizations. So when it comes to organized civil society organizations, we should know that NGOs or non-governmental organizations are also form a major part of this entire so-called civil society. But they are not the only ones, and many a time, just by mistaking NGOs for civil society, we will be also many a time not really be able to understand that NGOs, as much as the strengths, they also have their own limitations. So many kind of organizations which are not NGOs but which are membership based associations or organizations are have greater kind of advantage to be kind of very important partners or the kind of members of organizations in civil society organization in order to somewhere uh, do justice to its role as as mandated by any liberal democracy. So NGOs, we should understand that they are mostly funded by external agencies, and as such, they are sometimes perceived as the carriers of foreign values and political agendas. So also it is unclear exactly for whom the organization stands for. So when it comes to civil society, we are focused more on the interests of the citizens, and we expect lots of accountability and membership based organizations, just because of the very nature of their composition, they are expected to have much more accountability and much more kind of involvement of its members than NGOs, which many times are controlled by the donors or the kind of funding agencies. So we should also so that's where it is very important for us to make this kind of a very important distinction between NGOs and membership based organizations. Both of course are part of the civil society in any kind of democracy or any country, but we should know that NGOs have their own kind of limitations, and membership based organizations are better placed when it comes to doing justice to their kind of basic kind of interests as citizens of a particular country. So during the 1990s, we should know that civil society has been progressively enlarged to include a variety of new actors, because in 1990s there is kind of a structural adjustment programs which somewhere had lots of implications for the democracy as a whole, because of what we call as liberalization, globalization, privatization, and globalization. And naturally, it had its own kind of impact on civil society. And civil society had lots of professional organizations and many other occupation or trade-based organizations playing very important role. And also, globalization also opened up many kind of new avenues for new kind of associations, networks, which were hitherto or till then, which were much neglected. So the growth of civil society is tied to the rise of modern liberal democracy as well as capitalism in the West, because although all these our modern nation states are supposed to be welfare states, more and more we saw that all over the world, due to kind of what is called as neoliberalism, the government, what we today call as state capitalism or crony capitalism, try to control the governments in their favor rather than the in favor of the social kind of the poorest of the poor, who are supposed to have the kind of social welfare and social security measures or social insurance, and there was more and more kind of the the entire field was not very level playing field, and it was somewhere designed in favor of the kind of the corporate sector or the capitalists who wanted to have the state only as regulating or more of a kind of licensed kind of facilitating kind of an agent rather than more of controlling or regulating kind of an agency. So in such a context, we should understand that basically the foundations of all these so-called modern nation states are somewhere inspired by what is known as Enlightenment social contract theories, Basically, we can recall here the contributions made by John Locke or Rousseau and other kind of thinkers who somewhere felt that is basically a kind of a social contract. State and individuals somewhere have some kind of contract, and somewhere the individuals in this kind of contract give up some of their rights in exchange for the protection of the state against violence by others. And when it comes to the modern nation states, which are based on basically democracy and which are supposed to be welfare states, there it is not limited to the protection only against violence by others as it used to be in the monarchy, but also somewhere they had a mandate to somewhere give protection to its citizens against other kind of let's say any kind of poverty or any kind of discrimination or injustice or whatever, even kind of accidents or other any kind of pain or any kind of violence or any kind of injustice meted out to the citizens. That's why it is basically these are the principles of liberty, equality, fraternity are the foundations or foundational values based on which the entire modern nation states are supposed to be kind of governed, and the governance also somewhere has to accommodate the voice of the people, and that's where the civil society comes in as somewhere to collaborate wherever required to restrain the powers of the government or the kind of a state wherever required to protect its own kind of rights, because as much as the duties, despite the having entered into some kind of social contract with the state, having surrendered some of its rights, the citizens still retain most of their kind of rights, like right for free speech, association, and things of that sort, to protect their larger kind of interest. Because modern nation states are supposed to be compassionate and are supposed to be kind of primarily driven by the interests of its citizens, rather than being driven by let's say the narrow kind of interests of the politicians or the corporate world. So we should understand that the rise of capitalism in the form of neoliberalism challenged the kind of the very foundations of the so-called liberal democracies, and there many new actors also entered into the civil society, and that's where somewhere there it was expect somewhere a new kind of meaning had to be kind of invented for civil society organizations, because they somewhere had to stay true to their original kind of moorings of monitoring the state, holding government officials accountable, and counterbalancing the state powers. Because with the collusion of the governments or the state with the powerful, the rich, so-called the capitalists, somewhere this was there was a need felt by most of the people who were pro-poor or the pro-welfare or pro-development or development from below, or putting the citizens or the common man or common people at the heart of the entire development process, to somewhere reinvent the concept of democracy after 1990s. So civil society in relation to the state is said to be playing the various functions. So wherever required, because the state has its own kind of limitations, state is not able to kind of cater to large section of the poor, especially in a so-called industrially not so advanced countries like India. So there the civil society organizations are expected to collaborate rather than compete. And wherever there is, let's say, because of the bureaucratic and inflexible or many a time top-down kind of an approach adopted by the state, the civil society also many a time is expected to compete with the state, to show to the state what actually is the real development paradigm, how to put the last first, or how to cater to the needs of the poor. And also many a time the civil society also gets into conflict with the state, because many a time when the state doesn't do justice to its basic mandate of protecting the rights of the poor, or the disadvantaged sections or the marginalized sections, the excluded sections, or when the state becomes more authoritarian, then the civil society competes, the kind of gets into some kind of conflict with the state and tries to remind the state through various kind of protests or dharnas or agitations or various kind of public interest litigations or whatever instruments that it has at its disposal, democratic, non-violent kind of tools or instruments. It tries to have engage in some kind of conflict with the state to make the state come on its knees if it doesn't want to on its own understand that it is basically there, the government is basically there to take care of the poor and the disadvantaged people, and it has to somewhere put the interests of the common person or people at the heart of the entire discourse, rather than just trying to side with the people who can fund their election campaigns or things of that sort. So the major roles expected to be played by civil society in modern nation state are firstly, interest groups and other social groups participate in the legislative process of making laws and administrative regulations. That's where the civil society has to engage with the state by trying to participate in the legislative process, trying to influence the policies of the government, the kind of various kind of legislations, because before an act is passed, there will be a draft made available in the form of bill. So in this entire process, the participation of the civil society is expected. Along with the free media, they monitor and expose corruption. This is another very important kind of a function of the state. And in the Habermasian ideal of deliberative democracy, the civil society or organizations also express opinions and engage in civil reasoned debates in the public sphere. And that's why it is a collaborative kind of an approach which the civil society organizations are able to adopt as far as the its relationship with the state and other interest groups or their kind of members and collaborators are concerned. So we will try to briefly run through the kind of significance of civil society or the kind of history of civil society in India prior to COVID-19 pandemic. So we know that even before India became independent, the civil society played a very important or a very central role in the transition from the kind of the authoritarian regime of the British into the kind of independent people kind of elected governments of independent India. So to have the kind of democracy that we have now, it is the civil society organizations which have made a very huge contribution. So we had many kind of social networks based on the community, based on religion, based on various kind of other kind of the cultural and traditional kind of associations, and they continue to be a very active part of the civil society even now. So if you look at the governmental kind of approach is concerned, in the beginning government somewhere thought of becoming the main player or the main actor in the entire development discourse in India. So it was the kind of they relied heavily on social planning and policy and things of that sort. So community development programs were initiated. There was top-down approach. There was no participation of the people. There was no much kind of mechanisms to accommodate the voices or the interests of the people. And when it comes to slowly after, so because of this, after 2 or 3 decades of entire experiments based on these kind of 5-year plans or the planning commission trying to lead from the front, some so-called technocrats or the experts trying to tell people what is important for them through their schemes and programs, and people had to be only so-called beneficiaries or the receivers of the wisdom and the kind of plans of the kind of a passive kind of recipients or participants as far as this entire development was concerned. So the failure of this this entire kind of exercise somewhere made government as well as the kind of the citizens understand the importance of various kind of NGOs or so-called non-governmental organizations or voluntary agencies or organizations. So in 1970s somewhere, because they were at the grassroots working, understanding the people's interests, and they were closer to the excluded, and they had the kind of confidence reposed on them as far as the poor and the excluded sections of the society is concerned. So government also was forced, because of its various kind of failures, to accommodate the interests of the civil society. So there are also concerns regarding their legitimacy at the same time. So while realizing the importance of civil society organizations or NGOs, somewhere there was also because they became heavily kind of kind of dependent on their donors, especially the foreign kind of donors, and they were somewhere using people kind of problems as only kind of a good kind of a source for writing good proposals, so that they can try to somewhere have their profile enriched, and also somewhere many a time there was lack of transparency, lack of involvement, and somewhere they were also disconnected from the entire political, only other than some organizations which were not NGOs but very vibrant networks which were responsible for having kind of social movements which had a popular kind of support, and because of which they were able to have some kind of act as pressure groups on the government, because they had huge masses of the farmers or the women or Dalits and others or Adivasis rallying behind them. And other than those certain kind of organizations which cannot be called as NGOs, but basically some kind of networks of various kind of people and groups who had the kind of very clear kind of agenda of putting the people first, but NGOs somewhere dealing themselves from the political kind of arena, and that's where they were not able to understand properly the relationship between the citizens and their kind of the politics of the politicians, and they were only trying to get the some kind of funding for their poor eyes on. So poor people remain poor because the structures, social structures or economic structures or political structures which keep the people and people's interests out were never kind of challenged and never addressed. And this is where the kind of NGOs met with certain kind of failure. And in the neoliberal approach after 1990s, they somewhere once again state came out very powerfully, because as a welfare oriented, state oriented kind of approach which had to be kind of scaled up, because the liberalization and privatization, globalization met with lots of kind of resistance by these kind of popular movements, mainly because of alienation from the people, loss of lives and livelihoods, and employment options and things of that sort. And that's where the state had to somewhere come out with the various kind of employment generating or other kind of social security kind of measures to appease the masses. But somewhere they also went on the opposite direction of trying to identify more and more with the rich, and trying to have pro-poor kind of pro-rich and pro-capitalist kind of policies. So that's where civil society organizations in India should understand, have their own kind of limitations. They were not able to very effectively counter this liberalization and the privatization and globalization kind of the processes which had many kind of negative kind of impact on the lives of the unorganized sector and the women and already exploited sections. And this is mainly because the most of the kind of NGOs or civil society organizations, they themselves had not yet come out of, or have not yet come out of, the patriarchal and feudal mindset. They lack transparency, they lack accountability, they lack they are based on, they have lots of caste, religious and political affiliations. lots of nepotism and corruption. So whatever ills of the society, what we speak about, are also the ills of the NGOs or civil society organizations in India. So when it comes to these kind of liberating oneself from the social kind of ills, the NGOs or civil society organizations themselves have not come out of these kind of some of these greater social maladies, and that's where they lack that kind of moral or ethical authority to question even the government when it kind of promotes this kind of government also is guilty many a time of having this top-down approach and favoring the rich or the wealthy and things of that sort. So that's where the civil society itself in India is is not very different from the society at large. So there is lack of social development or real sense kind of development or liberation as far as the civil society organization, most of the civil society organizations concerned, and they lack the advocacy and the spirit of dissident. So they look at the state as more of a partner with them rather than trying to look at it, look at the state as somewhere accountable to the people, and they don't get into sufficient kind of discussions or dialogue or deliberation with the state. So that's where this is in brief the concept of civil society, and a brief kind of discussion that we had about its significance, as well as the kind of how in Indian context civil society have had very important role before independence and after independence. In the second part of my presentation, I will be dealing with mainly the challenges to civil society during lockdown period because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and how civil society has to grapple with some of the issues even after lockdown is lifted, and how it has to reinvent and rejuvenate itself to make it to somewhere have its roles and functions centered, so that it plays a very kind of a crucial kind of a role in Indian democracy. Yes. In the first part, we try to understand the concept of civil society, and also the significance of civil society for liberal democracies like India. And also we try to understand how civil society at various phases in Indian history, especially before independence, that is during the freedom struggle, and after independence, has tried to play its role. And also we try to understand how both the state and the NGOs have failed to somewhere take on board the poorer people or the excluded sections and vulnerable sections, for whom the state has to come out with the various welfare and social security and social insurance policies and programs. And that's where various other civil society organizations, especially after 1990s, once liberalization, privatization, and globalization, or what is known as a new economic policy or structural reforms in Indian economy were initiated. This called for new kind of organizations and new kind of strategies and approaches to be adopted by various kind of organizations. And to counter the negative effects of all these processes, certain networks of citizens also was formed. And now it is important for us to understand that the challenges that civil society faced during lockdown period is not necessarily because of its lack of efforts or lack of resources or lack of strategies during lockdown, but I would like to argue that it is mainly because NGOs in general and civil society in general and NGOs in particular had failed to somewhere disengage themselves from the social ills of the Indian society, and somewhere were not reflective enough to come out of those inequalities which had somewhere marred the growth of Indian society for decades. So NGOs themselves at two levels it failed. One is they were somewhere playing only brokerage kind of role instead of trying to play the advocacy and the lobbying role on behalf of the poor and the excluded sections. They were only trying to play intermediary kind of a role between the donors and the governments on the one hand and the so-called beneficiaries on the other. And when it comes to other civil society organization, and another difficulty that these NGOs as well as other civil society organizations faced was they somewhere were not able to come out of the narrow kind of religious and the caste-based and the kind of regionalism-based kind of affiliations, which did not allow them to somewhere to be liberated in their analysis as well as approach to be having a kind of approach which is befitting of any democracy. And that's why they were already kind of weak and vulnerable before the lockdown was announced, and they were not able to find a proper kind of balance between the kind of their charity based kind of approach which they exhibited during lockdown, and their kind of advocacy and empowerment kind of roles that they are expected to play in in a democracy like India. So one thing is they were most of these NGOs as well as other civil society organizations had, I think, not learned from the earlier experiences of World War I and II, as well as other kind of disasters, even the disasters in the 21st century, where unless we are very clear as civil society organizations that our loyalty lies with the people and we have allegiance only to the democratic principles like equality, fraternity, and liberty, and our kind of in Indian context, unless we are very clear that we draw our identity as well as mandate only from the Indian Constitution, we will not be able to stand with the vulnerable and excluded sections in the times of crisis. If we are not able to do it in normal times itself, then it is difficult to expect it during the crisis situations like the lockdown periods. And secondly, the civil society, as I told you, was already kind of weak in India as far as their resources, their organizational strength, their kind of strategies, and overall on the principle-based kind of approach is concerned. And this was further exposed during the lockdown due to the various kind of constraints imposed on the citizens of India, and civil society organizations were no exception to this. So during COVID-19 pandemic and consequent restrictions that were laid down, it mandated, for example, we were not allowed to step out of our houses unless it was kind of allowed on extraordinary kind of reasons, or the maybe for certain periods, hours of the day, and mandated wearing of masks and maintenance of distance and all that did not affect only the civil society organizations. It had affected the citizens as a whole. But civil society organizations also many a time maybe were constrained by these kind of restrictions and took time to really think of its roles and functions in a much broader kind of a manner, rather than thinking of only distributing of certain certain kind of food items, as well as some kind of items required to protect people from the COVID-19 infection. So there is a lack of proper response from civil society to certain issues. Of course, civil society organizations can say that it is a time where they have to stand with the government, and when the government itself is facing lots of challenges like fiscal deficit and the lack of human resources, trained staff and experts and things of that sort. But in a democracy, whether in normal times or even during crisis situations, I think it is important to realize that both government as well as civil society organizations are there to protect the interests of the poorest of the poor. Otherwise, democracy has no meaning. So, unplanned lockdown that destroyed livelihoods and lives, the urban eateries, vegetables vendors, bakeries that did not get sufficient time to clear their stock, overburdening and risking the lives of the police and ASHA workers, the people with whom serious health issues were suffering from serious health issues were left to self-medicate and suffer in silence, and the issue of not having enough facilities and ventilators for the infected persons, and frontline warriors not having proper personal protective kind of equipments, and impoverished public health system that was struggling to cater to the needs of even the limited number of people who were admitted there because they tested positive, and ruling kind of mentality or the tendency that took precedence over governance attitude that government was supposed to have, trying to control too much only through regulations like issuing circulars, notifications, orders, restrictions, and things of that sort, and use of force rather than education, and using especially lathis or what is called as police batons, and lodging FIRs on so many people, communalizing the issue by the media and politicians. Migrant workers were left in the lurch and who are still, many of them who are on the streets, and only now in the past 2 or 3 days they have started, majority of them have started moving to their native places, and the government asking us to live with the virus without properly explaining why and how it announced the lockdown and what was its preparation, what was its strategy, how much it has achieved in terms of its stated goals and things of that sort. And judiciary also not taking up certain issues on priority and giving proper directives to the government, other than the other day judiciary trying to tell the government, ask the government's clarification as to why it is not able to deliver the liquor to the houses or homes of the people who want to procure it, rather than asking why the government is not able to address the issues of migrant workers, why it is not able to address the issues of livelihoods and their transportation facilities, and the kind of saving of lives of citizens is concerned. So also the issue of the media houses and the social media full of fake news and some kind of blind beliefs being propagated. So these are the certain kind of issues which any civil society organization had to take up on priority basis, along with its trying to reach out to the hungry and the people who had to be distributed some kind of protective equipments. So this is, I think, majorly because the civil society in India was not much accustomed to do their lobbying and advocacy kind of functions. It somewhere did not think of its kind of role as basically to kind of speak on behalf of or make the kind of the marginalized, disempowered, voiceless people to speak out. And since it was not accustomed to this kind of a role, since it did not think of this as its vision and mission and goals, and since it did not have the required kind of experience and had not learned from earlier kind of disaster situations, since it did not reflect enough on its own past kind of failures. I think it failed to come together and address the issues that I listed out, including the issue of uh, the failure of the public health system in favor of the privatization of health, and also trying to the lack of police reforms, which resulted in police using violence and all punitive measures rather than educative and collaborative measures, and also treating the unorganized sector as disposable kind of commodities, especially falling kind of bowing down to the pressures of the real estate owners and builders. And that is where I think somewhere the earlier researchers also have very shown very clearly that unless the human capital, economic capital, and social capital of any society or country is made strong, it will be very difficult for that country to both face the disasters as well as to come out successfully these disaster situations. And lockdown period and this I think whatever post-lockdown periods that we'll have only shown us how, as civil society organizations, we have failed to build this human capital, economic capital, and social capital in collaboration with the government, whose primary responsibility it is to see to it that the citizens of its country have these kind of capitals, so that in good times as well as in disaster situations, the poorest of the poor are also taken care of. And it is not just the wealthy or the rich or the people upper middle class who can who have their kind of much required economic capital and social capital, human capital alone who can survive. So I think somewhere the earlier in the first 2 or 3 decades, the Indian in independent India, Indian government had failed by trying to have only kind of a top-down approach through its planning commission and 5-year plans and things of that sort. And I think NGOs and civil society in the consequent decades have also not been very successful in trying to really understand their kind of role for being with the people, with the especially the excluded sections, so that in a crisis situation they can act as the conscience of the nation and make the government and other decision-making authorities to put the poorer and vulnerable sections of the country at the forefront of their policy making and allocation of resources and things of that sort. So otherwise, it is very clear that unless we do it over the decades in a disaster kind of a situation, naturally, as we have observed, the inequities which are already there, like caste-based inequalities, like the gender-based inequalities, and the class-based inequalities, religion-based inequalities, they only get more accentuated rather than getting so. And always in any disaster, it is the poorest, it is the most vulnerable, it is the most excluded sections to bear the brunt. So in India, we have observed that there is more of a social distance than physical distance, when what is actually needed in this kind of situation is a physical distance. And civil society organizations also have failed to create the kind of consciousness and conscientization among the people in general, and among the people who perpetuate these kind of inequalities, like certain kind of politicians or certain kind of media houses, or the people with patriarchal and feudal mindset. So poorer households with less education and fewer job skills are made to suffer constantly, and especially in slums and where there are lower economic category of people living and the poorer people living, since there is always already a problem of substance abuse, crime, and drug abuse. They continue to suffer, and government anyway has the excuse that it has limited resources, and it is total concentration or focus is towards fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. So as I have made it very clear, somewhere it's a lost opportunity for the civil society organizations, because other than doing some kind of a charity for the people who are on the streets, were not a civil society organizations have not been very effective in carrying out their constitutionally mandated roles, or the intermediate space that has been given to them in this liberal democracy. So at least now we have to think of the post-lockdown period, or in future disasters, how NGOs as well as other civil society organizations can think of playing much more responsible and proactive roles. So we have to understand that we have lost legitimacy, and we are not being able to play our roles. We have to have some kind of soul searching, and we have to somewhere be the critical insiders for ourselves, and kind of analyze as to our values, as to our kind of strategies, as to our overall kind of approach, so that at least we can take some corrective measures in the future. So we need a model of associational democracy. So we need not always keep fighting and keep protesting against the governments, but we need not always be compromising also. So we need to strike a balance, whether in good times or in disaster-like situations. The values of democracy should not be compromised with. The promise of welfare state, especially for the poor, for the sick, for the elderly population, for the children and women, Dalits and Adivasis, should never be given up. That's why we should have an associational democracy where both the civil society and the government and the people for whom civil society as well as government is in place to have a collaborative associational kind of approach, where there is more of a dialogue, more of a inclusion at various levels. So it's the time we ventured out towards greater collaboration and stronger networks, rather than being divided and promoting or being silent when various political and other kind of divisive forces are trying to create disharmony and trying to weaken the human and social capital of this country. So we need to build a stronger kind of collaborations and networks cutting across castes and religions and regions and languages and other kind of gender and other kind of barriers. So we need to open up for collaborative approach across gender, religion, and caste-based organizations, as I already told you. And individuals and communities must be facilitated to participate in a process of dialogue involving exploration of the problems affecting them and the development and implementation of appropriate policy responses. The process of effective engagement with government agencies is crucially contingent on an open approach by officials, involving flexibility towards new interactive ways of responding to issues and concerns arising across society. So NGOs need to also be recognized as only one, okay, albeit they are important. We should understand that they are not the only actors in civil society. So that NGOs also have to do soul searching and have to understand that they are accountable to the people on whose names they write the proposals, or in whose name they carry out their business. And other civil society organizations also have to understand that we cannot overly rely on the NGOs other than for their philanthropic or charity-based approach. So when it comes to educative advocacy and empowerment kind of approach, which is very important in democracy for true and sustainable kind of development, which is also participatory in kind of nature. We need to other civil society organizations, especially the networks among all various kind of institutions and organizations and associations, have to be strengthened, so that whether in normal times and especially in kind of crisis situations like the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown period, we are able to function to the optimum and do justice to the people who rely very heavily on us, or the constitution which gives us the kind of rights for free speech, right of association and things of that sort, including public interest litigations. So civil society organizations need to act as facilitators and supporters of a broader civil kind of on broader kind of issues with low income communities themselves engaging in dialogue and negotiation. So we should not be trying to in ideal situations conditions, we should be allowing the low income communities themselves to directly represent their interests, or the excluded sections to directly represent their own. So we should be more of facilitators rather than speaking on their behalf. But definitely wherever it is urgent, wherever it is not possible, we have to also do the advocacy role. So we should speak on behalf of the vulnerable and excluded sections of society, especially the migrant workers and the people who are suffering with various kind of health issues, people who do not have, who have lost their lives and livelihoods, and there we should not shy away from doing lobbying and advocacy on their behalf, so that in a time-bound manner, in a phased manner, within 1 or 2 decades, we will have a country where there is not there is no poverty, there is no injustice, and at least not in absolute terms, even if it is present in relative terms, it should be manageable, and it should be kind of we should be able to build a society which is much more humane and compassionate. So I think the lockdown period, the COVID-19 has given us some kind of sufficient experience. It was unfortunate that due to various kind of reasons, we were not able to really make use of this kind of situation to really rise up to the occasion and bring about the policy and other kind of changes that were required on behalf of the poor. But at least we should learn lessons out of it and see to it that whether in normal times or whether in crisis situations, certain kind of priorities should be on the top of the list of both the government as well as civil society organizations, so that we do not regret a lost opportunity, but are ready for the challenging times with proper kind of strategies and proper kind of networks that can be put in place in the shortest possible time. So I thank all of you for your patient hearing, and also I thank the organizers for having given me this wonderful opportunity. Thank you.